Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I'm going to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about why finding the best exercise for a muscle probably doesn't matter once you're doing really hard sets to failure and multiple exercises out there. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so, and if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, would appreciate it so much. And also keep in mind, so much of this data we're seeing with everyone using their real life example, they're usually on lots of drugs. You can't use pro bodybuilders who developed a given muscle and say, oh, well, their favorite exercise is obviously it in a modern bodybuilder, because you'll go find people who beat them who did a different exercise. And then the person who beats them did a different exercise. So which one was it? So this is kind of the problem we run into with this idea of using anecdote for it. The same thing when we start looking at different research. I think what people are forgetting, various EMG studies or things they're looking at, but they're oftentimes only looking at one exercise. Okay, so even some of the hypertrophy studies, they're literally sometimes only comparing one exercise. Most people are doing multiple big movements. And I think what people forget, when workload gets high enough or you get to failure or you do a max effort type lift, all the muscles get involved. So this is where I would say to people, there's a reason athletes are still so jacked. There's a reason people who do even just big compounds are still often jacked, just as jacked as bodybuilders who don't use lots of drugs. So let's set that aside. So keep that in mind. You can't use Jay Cutler as your example because he's a genetic freak who uses lots and lots and lots of drugs. He would have looked amazing with any routine. Probably, not saying he would have been as good as he was, but let's be realistic. Genetics and drugs play a big part there. He could have done totally different exercise. He could have done a totally different training style and still probably been in the top 5 at the Mr. Olympia. You can't use that really as a good anecdote. The same thing, we look at the studies. Problem you run into, it's not always more growth. So that's one of the problems we run into. We can literally take what looks like the best exercise on paper, the best exercise in an EMG, and then in a hypertrophy study, it gets beat by a lat pull down. Right, talking about curls and stuff. That's the problem we've had. There have been literal studies doing side by side lat pull downs to failure versus curls, and the lat pull downs cause the same amount of muscle growth in the group compared to the one who just did curls. So and I mean, biomechanically, common sense almost looks like a course. A supine grip dumbbell curl to failure is going to be a better bicep exercise than a lat pull down. I mean, mechanistically, I think all of us can look at that and it would make sense. It's not an unreasonable conclusion, right? Like, no one's going to look at that and go, yeah, the lat pull down looks like the best bicep exercise, especially an overhand grip lat pull down, right? Which is what's done in some of those studies. None of us are thinking, I'm not even looking at it thinking that. It doesn't make sense just at face value. But then when it was compared to curls, that one whole study, the exact same muscle growth versus a group that did curls, no difference. What? Because they were doing them to failure. And I think this is the problem we run into when you start doing multi-joint exercises, really, really, really hard work sets across multiple sets. It's like, yeah, let's do 3 sets to failure twice a week. 3 sets twice a week. Oh, man. Yeah. Of course it caused maximum bicep growth for a novice lifter. You see the point? The same thing when we start looking at EMGs, on particularly people who are trained lifters, power lifters. All of it goes out the window as soon as they start maxing out. That's the problem they ran into. Like, oh, let's test the different grips, right? Let's take some actual competitive power lifters and let's do a wide grip, a medium grip, and a really close grip bench and see how they activate. Every time they got to 90% or higher for 1 rep, they hit 100% EMG in all the muscles. There was like no difference. Like, man, the pecs, the triceps all recruited the exact same amount. Well, that doesn't make sense. Biomechanically, no, we definitely are looking saying that wider grip should hit more pec, the closer grip should hit more tricep. Like, this is a perfectly reasonable conclusion. And it does with lower intensity. But when we start going really hard, doing a rep with 90% or higher, or you take a set to failure, what happens? Everything gets activated at the end. Why? Because it's absolutely maximally recruiting all the muscles involved once it gets super heavy, or when you start going to failure even with 8 or 10 reps. So we see the problem with a lot of this. All this stuff starts going out the window because once muscles start really being pushed to their limits, a lot of these ideas of, well, this muscle is going to work best here. Well, yeah, with submaximal sets, obviously, because of the mechanics and angle involved. And this is a point I make, and it still might make a difference a small amount. But at the end of the day, if you are really training hard, you are doing really and truly legitimately hard sets, and you're doing multiple sets, pretty much every muscle involved is going to get a really good training stimulus. Could we argue still, yeah, another exercise versus the one you used might have caused a tiny amount more growth? Sure. But it's going to be fairly small. It's not going to be double. It's going to be like a percentile or two. And we have to understand that. This is why it's like, look, if you just go really hard on your basic movements, it's such good exercise economy, simply because everything involved is going to grow. And again, if you're holding back, sure, certain muscles are going to get way more growth than others. But if you're going really hard, you're going to failure, or very, very close to failure, and you're progressively overloading, and we're doing it for significant amounts of volume. So we're repeatedly doing it. Eventually, almost every muscle fiber is going to get reached in those muscles. Okay, and so yes, even in that context, a row or a pull-up is going to work the side delt. An overhead press is still going to end up working the side delt to some extent. That's what's going to happen. And so again, when we really understand these things and you realize the same thing, it probably doesn't matter what type of curl you do for the bicep. Concentration curl, a preacher curl, a hammer curl. When the sets get really hard, you start taking multiple sets to failure, you're still probably reaching almost every muscle fiber in that bicep. Okay, even with the hammer curl at that point. And again, this is why guys get big. People are like, well, how come these guys keep getting big on different exercises? Well, this is probably a factor. Right, because at the end of the day, the muscle is still working extremely hard. And it really is. If a muscle works extremely hard, really and truly legitimately hard, it's going to get some growth stimulus, even if technically the angles weren't optimal.